picture that you have up on the screen right now. Work with the tutorial that we started on oil painting and get back to our lovely picture here and try to play around with it. I did do a little work over the week. I'm so sorry. I told you I wouldn't. I did anyway. But not too much, just to get a little bit out of my system. So I will be starting one piece here, and there we go. So when we're working on something like space fantasy like this, I know I'm a horrible person because I camera adjust during the show. What are you doing to me, Jay? I'm trying to make sure that we don't have too much of a sheen going on this. And I don't mean Charlie or Martin. Just so that we've got, you know, we're good and I don't have to worry about a lot of things like bouncing around here while we're working. So here we are, 5:05. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this tonight and then switch over, stop the broadcast, and start our regular ordinary. So I got a few inches about oils, and they are more detail-oriented brushes because that's where we're at right now. We're working on details. So I have a liner, nice chisel tip, small detail brush, and this is for blending. All right, and these are all just straight out of Michaels, but Artist Loft is their brand that's called a moth brush, is the moving brush, a tight detail, a detail brush, and of course the specialty brush or the fine liner, the signature liner, the script liner. So why on earth would I need a script liner? Well, let's take a peek here at our friend up here, the ship that I started to do some detail on. It's good, but I want to get some real tight detail in it, because if I don't, it's not much of in the way of illustration, right? So we're going to grab some water. Sorry, I got off the mic there for a second. And grab some water and get going on this. The curtain's going on. Down. Save her. Focus for now on this. Say hi to okay. Here. And grab some white on my titanium white. Know my love is that very often I really like to use unbleached titanium when I'm doing my acrylic paintings. It's such a lovely color and it's totally underrated. I don't know why it's underrated, but it is. It makes me very unhappy. So when I'm doing this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to load the liner up. You guys can't even see that. There we go. I'm going to load the liner up. You still can't see it. Oh my gosh. You know what? I'm just going to turn down the palette. Refocus afterwards. So I'm loading the liner up. with a little bit of water, because if I were working with oils that weren't water mixable, I'd put a little turpentine in there and thin it down. But I can thin with water here, so I'm going to thin that out. I'm going to get a nice script line with that, and I'm going to put that into the piece now. Looks like I've got a poor connection. Bear with me. It's going to try to pick itself back up. There we go. Now we're getting picked up again. So, a couple of things. First of all, we're your wife tube. Looks like we might have regained some connection there. Great, I love regaining connectivity. Okay, as I was saying, if you have the ability to, depending on where you're watching, please subscribe. Helps me out, helps me help other people learn how to use their tools. And, if you want to join HAPS, we'd love to have you on HAPS. It's a wonderful platform. I really like it. So this is like really great for lines, especially when you're doing highlight lines. Something I think I mentioned last week, but I'll mention it again, is that when you are working with oils, your brushes should be just for your oils. You shouldn't mix your acrylic brushes and your oil brushes, or your watercolor brushes and your oil brushes. Your watercolor and acrylic should have separate sets for those, but in all honesty, if you keep them clean, they'll work just fine for either. And especially with the way that I work, where I'm doing a lot of with acrylic, doesn't really, doesn't do much of anything. So it's these fine little details that I'm putting in with the watered down oils and the script brush that will help to really define kind of the sci-fi ends of this and bring out the real portion of the surreal that we're trying to create. Because remember, that's part of this whole thing, is that when you're doing an illustration of fantasy, whether it be fairy fantasy or science fiction, it's all a matter of creating that surreal illusion where things are plausible. And the reason I call it a surreal illusion is because it's not real. It's made up and different from the reality that it's supposed to be embodying. So it's just one of those things where we really could kind of think about what we're doing when we're making this artwork. See, there's 37 folks that have decided to at least pop in and say hi. Hi! And as with all illustrations, highlights and shadows are uber important. It's what kind of defines everything that we're looking at and seeing. Now, the engine that I've got here and the engines that I'm building will be kind of different in that in back of them, since I'm using oils, what's really, really convenient about this is I can go ahead and easily make something look like it's glowing. So when I get to doing the power in the back of these things, I can make it just look like it has a faint glow. Because it's a cruiser, it's not like, it's obviously not a ship that's got a massive amount of power or anything on it. The liners are great too for things like this where you want to add that detail in that defines science fiction so well. You know, we're trying to make something that looks like it was built, that it was created by some sort of being. And in order to do that, oops, getting my camera there. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to make it so that we've got some panel work here. Now remember, I'm going to kind of go for that 50s movie poster aesthetic with this one. So things aren't going to be necessarily as like grungy as they would be for, say, the 70s when things came out. Like Star Wars was, you know, a little bit crazy when it came to this. Sci-fi to that point was all, hey Molly! Sci-fi to that point was all very much about good, clean lines and, you know, things being very, very, you know, sleek equaled high tech. And, you know, for the purposes of Star Wars, to emphasize the world and how that world worked, Lucas really wanted things to look like they had been worn, like they had been used, like they had been lived in. And that carried through sci-fi from that moment on. Now, were there still sci-fi that was clean and crisp? Absolutely. Pretty much everything on Star Trek was always like that. Because they wanted it to look like a utopian society. So whenever you looked at the Federation ships, everything was pristine. It had to be. If it wasn't, it wouldn't have for us to eat, which was they were trying to get across. So yeah, you see these little tiny lines that I'm making. I don't even know if you can see them on the video. Yeah, you can. Okay, you can see them. Okay, so we've made some places here that, you know, are defining our ship. I don't want to start like outlining everything either, because that doesn't work either. No. And I'm probably going to put the liner to bed in just a little bit here for a second. Like I said, I'm not going to do the entire painting tonight because there's a lot to do here. This painting is going to take hours and hours and hours and hours to complete. But I'm happy to work on it here. Also, we got a double dose of Draw and Paint Club this week because we're going to be out for the next couple weeks. I've got you know, some major things going on. I got my dad's birthday next week. Woohoo! And then I've got, not to mention I have a show that I'm doing, Romeo and Juliet online. If you want tickets to that, you can go to beacon.booktix.com That's Beacon, BACON, .booktix, BOOKTIX.com to watch the live streams of that show next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thursday and Friday at 7, Saturday at 2 and 7. Everything is Eastern time. Yeah, I know, isn't it? There's a lot of material happening all at once here. And you know, that's purposeful. Again, working on that like 1950s sort of look to sci-fi illustration, there was a lot of information that was put down. A lot of information. Because the more detailed something was, the more real. And you know what? That carried through. That wasn't just in the 50s. That's right up until today. We look at sci-fi illustration even today, it's so super detailed. In fact, it's even more so because, you know, a lot of people are working digitally. And that means that you can pretty much detail pixel by pixel, which is amazing what you can do when you really break it down. I think I'm going to need a different brush shortly. Liners and curves are not friends. But you get the idea. So I'm going to wash this off and let this dry out a little bit. I'm going to grab that detail brush, which was the fine detail brush. It was the really little tiny mini. That's great. I mean, we want that in a composition, Molly. We want to keep making sure that everybody's moving and going all over the place, but not leaving the picture. You know, that's the trick, is getting it so that you've intrigued the audience enough to look around the picture, but you don't lose them in the picture. You know, like you don't ask them to go away within the picture. So it's been almost a week since I worked on this. I did a little bit of work on it on Tuesday. Everything is mostly dry, but it still takes a while. You know, this technically will not be ready for a varnish until it's 6 months old. It takes a while for these things to be ready to hold their own in the outside world. That's great. I'm glad you know, round objects tend to do that in a composition like this, which is kind of what you want them to do. You want them to be moving around, skirting around. And there's just something about oils, like there's just a vibrancy that you get off of an oil that you can't get off of any other medium. You know? I mean, you can use like gloss mediums and stuff for acrylics. You can almost get them to the point where they look like oils, but they'll always be just slightly shy of what you wanted. So again, there'll be a lot more detail in here once I get really rocking on it. I'm going to try to do a little bit of the glow coming off of the back of the engine, just to show you guys how that's done. So I'm going to be working over here. We want to start. My God, I can't believe I did that. We want to start broad. So I want to start with a brush that's a little bit rough, and maybe doesn't have as fine a point to do stuff as, you know, as other things. So I'm going to start with this one. You know, it's a little rough around the edges. So I'm going to take, and I'm going to build on pure white. And I do go on the sides of the canvas. So I'm going to build on top of that. But what I want to do first is I'm going to smudge it a little bit. And I really imagine this having, like, to reflect some of this blue that we've got going on. I really, really want to get like a bluish, almost a purplish thing going on here. So that it looks like a different sort of emission than what we'd expect to see. So it's not necessarily like fire, more like particle play. And now I'm going to pop in some more detail. Because now I can. So I'm going to try to grab some really super bright blue. Tap that into there. So really kind of like dealing with a little bit of stippling here when it comes to these particles. And of course around the side, which you guys can't see, but I'll show it to you later. And then to really kind of like make that stand out and make that work, that's where the titanium comes in and is really, really important. Because the titanium white is the vibrance, you know, in this piece. It's where things are going to like really, really pop out. So when you're using oils, titanium white is your best friend. So now we can give some direction to these popping particles. That's one of the things whenever you're doing any sort of something that's flowing, you have to give it direction. Because if you don't give it direction, like you've got to force the eye of the viewer. Because if you don't, it's just going to look like it's exploding all over the place and has no real. It's not going to get you anywhere, right? Whereas this now is going to, you know, push it forward, get it moving in a direction. We like to see trails of things. And if some of it's haphazard, that's fine, as long as we give an idea of where we think it's going. So that's our nice little piece going on there. When it comes to that stuff, let's go down to revisit our spidery friend here. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to play with the transparency on these because this is really important. They're ice pieces, right? So one of the things that I want to do is I want to get some of this gray that's in the background to kind of like refract and reflect through them, because right now they're solid objects. And I'm not really fond of that. That's not what I intended for them. They should have more of a ice kind of feel to them, and a slight transparency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and adopt some gray in there. I don't think that gray has enough Prussian blue in it. Now that I'm looking at it, I don't really think it does. No, it doesn't. That's all right. That's why we keep experimenting as we're doing it around. So I'm going to spend about maybe 5 more minutes here, and then I'm going to have to set up for the next one. But I just did want to give everybody a little bit of a... I don't want to leave everybody hanging with this. So I'm using a very thin sort of piece there, and just suggesting that, you know, that we can see through it with the color that's in the background is enough to really kind of like sell it. Because when you see ice, you want to see a crystalline form. So you want to be able to see through it. You want a suggestion that it is transparent. And of course, you know, the real way to do that is to just water down whatever you're using for the ice. But in this case, I really wanted the kind of stark but also reflective in the ice tone. And so I'm going to put some red down here too, so that way you'll be able to actually kind of like get the gist that it's all over the place. And a fine wash of white over that would work too. So, this is a short little broadcast, but I hope that you get something out of it, and I hope that I will see you again soon. I'm going to be back in about 15-20 minutes for our normal Sunday, and this week we are working on one of my old sketches from an old sketchbook of a noob. So that's gonna be hoot and holler. I can't wait to see him. What's gonna manifest out of that? Because I have an idea of what I'm doing, and it's a little bit out of the norm for me. I'm gonna experiment, and then I'm gonna leave you hanging for 2 weeks. Just because I'm cruel like that. Horrible, horrible person. And these are the sorts of things where I could be going and doing this mindlessly for the most part for like hours. It's just one of those things where, you know, I just get really into it and go for it. But I do have to leave, and I have to leave mostly because I have to clean up the oils before I continue with the next phase of things. Because I am not using oils on the next piece. So I gotta make sure that I've got these at least cleaned up to a point where they're easier to store. Okay. And I hope you enjoyed just a little bit of tutorial tonight and a little bit of fun playing around with oils. We will be back at 6 with our next piece for the evening. So I'll see you in a bitsy. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. As per normal, stay safe, stay healthy, and make art. And you can make art in 20 minutes. I'll see you later.